Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Godly Play story from St. John the Baptist Dixie Anglican Church. My name is Janice Kretschmann, and I would like to welcome you to the circle today. Wherever you are watching this, and whoever you are watching this with, and however you are watching this, if you're listening or if you're reading the captions, and as always, whenever you are watching this, it's good to have you here. Thank you. Speaking of whenever you are watching this, whenever you are watching this, we are still acknowledging Palm Sunday today. That is the last purple piece in the calendar of the church year before we get ready for the great mystery of Easter. And I will put that aside, and we will begin, as we always do, with the candle. There was once someone who said such amazing things and who did such wonderful things that people began to follow him. And one day they just had to ask, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am the light." And again, because it's Lent, we will leave the light lit while we share the story today. The story today might look a little familiar. We've shared part of it before, a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have a new part of it today. But before we get to the new part, let's get caught up on the parts we've shared before, just to make sure it's fresh in our minds. It begins with the baby, and the mother and the father who looked after the baby and gave him everything he needed, and he began to grow. To remind myself of that part of the story, when I looked around the house, I found this picture of my parents. Whoops! I found this picture of my parents to remind me of that part of the story. This picture reminds us of the baby who grew into a boy and who went with his parents to Jerusalem for a big festival and who stayed behind to talk to the priests and the leaders at the temple. His parents were on their way home when they noticed he was missing. They had to look for him. And when they found him, he said, "Didn't you know I would be in my father's house?" Which confused his parents because their father's house was the carpenter shop back in Nazareth. And they didn't understand, but they didn't forget. To remind myself of that part of the story when I looked around the house, I found this switch plate from the light in my room when I was a child, to remind me of how I caused my parents a bit of trouble from time to time. This is the part of the story where the boy grew into a man. His name was Jesus, and he was baptized by his cousin John, who didn't want to baptize him because he was the Messiah, and it should be the other way around. But Jesus said, "You need to baptize me," and God was very happy about this. To remind myself of that part of the story, I found a bowl of water to remind me of Jesus' baptism. In this part of the story, Jesus went into the desert and spent time in the desert getting ready for his ministry on earth. And the devil was there and tempted him to challenge God, tempted him not to trust God, tempted him to think he was more powerful. When I looked around the house for something to remind me of that part of the story, I found a few rocks from my father's rock collection. I like this one. It kind of looks like a tree. The rocks reminded me of the stones and rocks in the desert when Jesus was being tempted. This part of the story talks about Jesus and how he got close to people, so close he could touch them. Like in this picture, he was healing the blind man. About how when he got close to people, that close to people, they just changed. To remind me of this part of the story, when I looked around the house, I found these, trying to place them so you can see them. These are my other pair of glasses. And now we have the new part of the story. There is a lot going on in this picture. There is a lot going on in this story. And I think it might be easier to tell if I use something else. We'll come back to the picture in just a moment. Jesus went to Jerusalem for the last time. It was the time of the Passover, and the city was full of people from many different lands. They thought Jesus was coming to be king, but they weren't paying attention. He wasn't riding on a great white horse when he came into the city. He wasn't being carried by soldiers. He was riding on a donkey, and it wasn't even his. He had borrowed it. Still, that Sunday when Jesus came into Jerusalem, people waved palm branches, which were a sign of kings. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Jesus went into the temple to teach. Every night, he went back to the Mount of Olives with the 12. These are 3, but we'll pretend there are 12. The people watched him and whispered that the Mount of Olives was where angels were supposed to come down to make an army to drive away the Roman soldiers. One day, when Jesus was teaching in the temple, he said, "Do you see that old woman over there? She's going to put something in the money box. Listen." Did you hear anything? No. She put the smallest coin there is in the box. That was all the money she had. Now, here comes a rich man. He has so much money to put into the money box that he had to have help to carry it. His money makes a huge clanging and ringing as they pour it into the box. Now, I wonder which one really gave the most, the old woman or the rich man? Some said the rich man gave the most. Some said the old woman. The temple guard said, "On Thursday we will take him." But on Thursday they couldn't find him. That evening, Jesus and the 12 hurried through the dark streets to a house. They climbed up the stairs to an upper room and shared their Last Supper together. After they had everything they wanted to eat, Jesus took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it and said something like, "Whenever you break the bread like this and share it, I will be there." He also took a cup of wine, gave thanks to God for it, and said, "Whenever you share a cup of wine like this, I will be there." What was he talking about? He was always saying things like that. How could they know? Still, they did not forget, and later they would understand. Suddenly Judas got up and left. The rest sang a hymn and then went to the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. Jesus wanted to pray. When he was finished, he joined the 12. But Judas came out of the dark and greeted him. This was a signal for the temple guards to take him. They too came out of the shadows and took Jesus away with them into the night. The 12 disappeared into the darkness as well. There really is a lot going on in this picture, isn't there? To remind me of this part of the story, I'm using some of these figures from the stories we just shared to remind me of the people that Jesus had dinner with and all the other people in that part of the story. Well, the picture for next week has two sides. I wonder how that works. Well, before we go, the light couldn't stay in just that time, in just that place, and with just those people. So the light changed. I don't know if you can see it, but the smoke from an extinguished candle is sometimes quite visible as it drifts through the room, and sometimes you can smell the distinct smell of a candle that's just been put out. So the light changed. And now the light can be with all people, in all places, and at all times. Well, I hope you come back next week. I hope you can help me figure out how this part of the story works. I hope you can find things around the house where you live to remind you of the different parts of this story. I hope you stay tuned for the very end of this video when Simon and I show you something very interesting to do with those palm fronds that were on the road into Jerusalem. So until we see you again next week, thank you very much for being here. Take care, everyone. Bye for now. Hi, everyone. Simon and I are here to show you how to take one of these, and fold it so you get a cross. I was at church a few days ago helping some people make some of these for Palm Sunday, which we're acknowledging today, and I think I remember the steps you need to do it. This one is a little bit softer on the edges, so I'm going to use it. Simon, this is a smaller one. You might be able to, oh, okay, try if you wish. And if you have a palm frond, which is what this is, I have to say that slowly, it's a bit of a tongue twister for me. If you have a palm frond around, you can use that. If not, you might have some wild grasses, some large-leaved grasses in your yard, or maybe some bamboo. If you're using plants, be sure you ask first. Or you might just have a long strip of paper or some ribbon, or maybe you can use something like the belt from a house coat. That could work. And what you do is you take the wider end here and you fold it over, kind of like a square. And then you fold it over again. So that's something you do twice. You fold it over and then you fold it over again. This whole process is mostly things you do twice. Every once in a while, there's something you do once. But that's something you do twice. You make a square and you fold it again. And then, a cross goes this way and then across a little bit for the arms. And then you make the arms. So you fold it once for the one arm and a second time for the other arm. You have to hold it carefully here because if you let go, it will go back to the beginning. If that happens, you just start again. So you folded it twice, and then you folded in a larger fold, you've made the arms twice. Now, there's something you do once. You take this longer arm, and you fold it up at a bit of an angle. I'll turn it around so you can see. You make the arm, the other arm, and then you fold it at an angle. That's something you do once. Now, you carefully, this part's tricky, you carefully take this very pointy end of the leaf, or the blade, or the palm frond, and you poke it through this little hole here that you made with the pocket. Simon? Thank you, buddy. And you gently poke it through the pocket. See how it's come out the bottom? You pull it all the way through tightly. If you have a cat doing this, you have to just reach around and look. Pull it all the way through tightly and pinch it a little bit. Thank you for helping, buddy. So at the back, you folded it up, you poked it through, and now you want to do that again. So you fold it up, and you poke it through. This is getting tricky. You poke it through a second time. Now, you don't have to hold it so tightly, because you've gone through again. So essentially this is a knot. And now you have this part of the cross, which doesn't look like a cross, but bear with me. This next thing is something you do only once. You turn this down, and one last time, you may have to squeeze the sides together just a bit to make a bit more room. One last time, you put the pointy end through. But this time you don't pull it all the way. And there, you have a cross. And now I can go film the story for today. So this is kind of like the circle of the church year, where the ending has a beginning and the beginning has an ending. If you give this a shot, let me know how it turns out. Have fun!